Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go through how I care for my variegated hibiscus indoors. I live in Ireland, and so due to our climate this really has to be cared for indoors, but it's a really beautiful plant and I'm hoping that I can help some of you to enjoy its beauty in an indoor setting. So this is my variegated hibiscus. It's kind of quite wide now. And growing all over the place. It has quite a few kind of stalks. This is known as Hibiscus rosa-sinensis variegata, or the Snow Queen cultivar of Hibiscus rosa-sinensis. So I have had this plant since I think the end of summer 2021, so around a year and a half now by this time, and I'm pretty sure I have the care down for this, and I'm pretty confident with how I've been able to care for it. I've also had it flower for me, and so I think it's time to share those tips with you so that you can enjoy this absolutely gorgeous variegated plant in your home. So this plant is in the hibiscus genus, of which there are over 100 species included within that. It is also in the Malvaceae family, which is the mallow family. This plant is also known as the China rose, which is funny because it's not from China and it is not a rose. Hibiscus rosa-sinensis was first described in 1753 by Carl Linnaeus. And so it's native to warm, temperate, tropical and subtropical climates. It's native to a place called Vanuatu, which is located west of Fiji. Hibiscus are known for their really big, bright, showy flowers. And also the tea of Hibiscus rosa-sinensis is also widely used because of its high vitamin C content. I didn't know this the last time this flowered, so I'm definitely going to try that out the next time this plant flowers for me. The petals of the flowers can also be used as a pH indicator, with a dark pink colour representing acidic and a green colour representing basic pH levels. It is also the national flower of Malaysia. So let's get into how I care for this plant indoors. So up straight at the top is watering. So I find that watering is really my main thing with this plant and something that I really have to look out for regularly. The roots of this plant are very fine, which means that basically in terms of drying out, they don't do very well for a very long amount of time, if you know what I mean. So when this plant needs to be watered, it looks visibly thirsty. When I sat down to film this video, I noticed that it needed water, as it does quite regularly. So I filmed a little clip for you to show you what it kind of looks like when it's thirsty. So the leaves of this plant are very thin, and when it needs water, they're very droopy, very floppy. They can easily break in your hands if you touch them, and it visibly just looks sad and dehydrated. So that's really how I know how to water this. It is best to catch it just when this starts to happen, but to be honest, it's often that I get to this plant and it looks really, really sad, and then I water it. Now, because of that, if you leave it too long in between waterings, you can lose a couple of leaves on the way, which I regularly do lose leaves because of this. They turn yellow and they go crispy and dry and fall off quite quickly. This can be over the space of a day or 2 days before I get to it for watering. So it definitely cannot stay long and healthy without water. So that's basically what I do. I will wait for it to get just a little bit floppy before I water it, and I've never had a problem with overwatering or root rot with this plant whatsoever. As far as fertilizer goes, if some of you are familiar with my channel, you know that I don't really go in depth with my fertilizing for almost all of my houseplants. I generally just use an organic seaweed fertilizer for all of my plants. I don't get too into the NP and K content of each, but I do know that potassium does encourage this plant and all plants to flower. So if you're having trouble flowering, you could try a fertilizer with a higher potassium content. But I fertilise as normal as I do with all of my plants with this diluted organic seaweed fertiliser, which is actually made in Ireland. There's a couple of them that I kind of go between, and I'll do that throughout the growing season and maybe once or twice over winter, to be honest, because of my grow lights and how warm it is in this room. Even in winter, I can get away with doing that throughout winter as well. But as I said, it's not as often. So light is really one of those other things like watering that I think is the most important for this plant. Of course, with all variegated plants, they require a higher light input because the white in the leaves does not contain chlorophyll, which is the green part in the leaves, and thus they can't actually absorb the photons of light whatsoever. So they generally need a higher light for those green parts to survive and make their food. Now, of course, where this plant is native to, it does generally have high light and high sun. So as soon as I got this plant, I put it straight under my Spider Farmer SF1000 grow light that I have behind me, which is my strongest grow light, and I have it on the first shelf. And to be honest, it has been there non-stop since I got it. I haven't ever moved it because it's done so well. I never found any issues with burning of the leaves or signs that it's getting too much light. It seems really happy, so that is a good spot for it for me. If you have strong light from your windows, a good southeast or southwest facing window, or even a south window might be enough for this, but do just keep an eye on how the plant is reacting to that. Of course, I think you probably can grow this as well, even in Ireland, without a grow light, as long as you keep it in the highest light areas that you have. It definitely, because the leaves are so thin, I would assume that it does burn if it gets too much light as well. So just be careful of that whenever you're trying out suitable positions in your house for this plant to grow. But I do think that has been a huge factor in how healthy this plant has been for me is the constant stable highlight situation as well as the watering. For the soil, I also don't really change my soil content that much across my plants. I generally use, now obviously cactus and things like that, I will use a much more sandy mix, but for most of my plants I use a very chunky soil mix. This in particular has, you know, a mix of cocoa coir, organic compost, very high quality organic compost, vermicompost. It also has vermiculite, perlite, leca, bark, so it's quite chunky and it's been really happy with this so far. I've only repotted it once since I got it a year and a half ago, but it might be due for a repotting in the near future, maybe in a month or two as well. I would basically judge that between how short the amount of time is in between when it needs waterings. So if that gets, you know, really close together and it's drying out constantly, this is obviously not good for this plant and I will repot it. But it seems to be doing very well. So as far as propagating this plant, I haven't yet had any success with that. I think plants that have a much more woody bark, like this does, it does have quite woody bark. It's quite difficult to propagate this sometimes, even with the newer growth. I have tried propagating it in water, but I have failed, just being upfront about that. They all have rotted no matter what I've done. I've tried a couple of times and it does not root well in water, for me at least. I am going to try that with maybe some rooting hormone. I've also put a top coating or two into the soil and tried that. That hasn't worked either. So I don't feel, from my experience at least, that it propagates very easily, but I'm going to continue to try that and maybe I'll do an update in the future if I figure out a method that works for me. I have not tried like a prop box. I haven't tried rooting in perlite. They generally are a bit more difficult for me for some reason, so I generally stick with ways that I've had success with personally. But yeah, I'm sure there's other ways to do it. I haven't put a lot of effort into that either though, so take that with a grain of salt. So pruning is the next thing I want to talk about. So for the longest time, I did not prune this plant. To be honest, for the first year that I got it, I did not prune it because it was doing so well and I was quite scared about how that was going to go. I didn't really want to do that. Now, the thing is that this plant flowered for me before I pruned it. So obviously the flowers were coming close to the newest growth at the end of each kind of stalk. And since I pruned it, it hasn't reflowered, but I think that's pretty normal. I'll talk about flowering in more detail in a moment, but basically I just cut a couple of the stalks back and it reacted really well to that, to be honest. It made it much more bushy. I'm definitely going to continue to propagate it. And, you know, like anything, when you propagate it, it kind of splits off into two, let's say, can you even see this? Into two kind of stalks, one here, one here. And it just helps with the appearance of the plant and making it bushier. I also think the plant has enjoyed that. I'm definitely going to prune it again in spring. But then I'm going to hold off for a bit because I'd like it to flower again, because that's really enjoyable, of course. So when it comes to flowering, which is kind of one of the most exciting things I think about growing hibiscus indoors, obviously the flowers are just absolutely amazing, beautiful, really showy and really nice to look at. Obviously, if you're trying to encourage flowering, I would hold back on the pruning. I would, you know, keep just consistent care, good light, good watering, don't let it dry out for too long. And that did really well for me. I do think that the highlight of this grow light did encourage the flowering as well, because it mimics the natural environment. I think that's why it flowered for me so fast. So I got it at the end of summer 2021, and the first flowering for me was actually, it was like either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day on the same year. So I only had it a couple of months, and after that point, it consistently flowered. Now, each flower only lasts 24 hours, but I found that it was kind of reflowering from the same stalk, but a different bud each time. And it was kind of doing that on and off for about 6 months. I did take a time lapse of the first flower that opened for this, as I said, in December 2021. So I'll include that. It's actually uploaded as a shorts on my channel, and it's still one of my favorite time lapses I've ever done. It's just so beautiful. Because of the shape of the flowers and the nature of them, I think it's probably pollinated by like butterflies or hummingbirds or something like that. It also generally starts to open towards the night, which may indicate pollination by moths, but to be honest, it's like a peak opening period just in the morning. So it starts opening at night, and then by the morning it's fully open. So it's most likely by a butterfly or bird, in my opinion, and that seems to be well thought in the research as well. Yeah, that's basically it for this plant, to be honest. If you have any questions or things that I didn't touch on, do let me know down below. I'll be happy to answer anything if I can, or direct you to where you might be able to get the information. To be honest, this is really one of my favorite plants in my collection. When I picked it up, I didn't realize that it was going to become that for me, but it's just done so well, and the flowering, like I said, is just so spectacular. It's absolutely a joy to grow. I do have to keep my eye on it. It's one of those few plants in my collection that I have to just keep looking at every couple of days to see if it's dry and needs water, but other than that, it's been super easy for me to grow. And I mean, I think it's just beautiful. I think it's so cool. Such a lovely plant to have. And if you pick one up, I hope that it grows really well for you. So that is it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. I'm going to be doing a lot more care tips videos in the future. So if you have any suggestions or plants that you know that I have that you would really like a care tips video on, then please let me know in the comments. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again very soon in the next video. Bye.